Hello and welcome to Gavel. I'm your host, Cobb District Attorney Vic Reynolds. We're very excited to be back in the studio with our partners here at TV23 for the 14th installment of this show. Gavel is a show about the criminal justice system in Cobb County, and our goal and mission here is to inform and educate our citizens about what happens in the criminal justice system. In past episodes of this show, we've taken a look at how various court systems work: juvenile court, probate court. We've also taken a look at what happens if you happen to be a victim of a crime in this county. And in the future, we'll be taking a look at some other parts and portions of the criminal justice system. For example, what happens if you get noticed to be on jury duty? What happens if you or a loved one is placed on probation? But today we're going to take a look at a subject that I think is very interesting to a lot of people in our county, particularly those who may be involved in operating or running small businesses. And that's the investigation and prosecution of what we call white-collar crime in Cobb County. And to help us delve into this subject today, I'm very honored to have as our guest two of the prosecutors that I have the pleasure and honor of working with day in and day out, John Melvin and Jason Marbut. These two gentlemen handle the bulk of white-collar prosecutions in our county. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on Gavel to Gavel.
Thank you, Vic.
John, let's start with you. You're a deputy chief in the Cobb DA's office, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe you're a career prosecutor. Is that correct?
21 years, yes, sir.
Well, thank you. Well, on behalf of the citizens of this county and what I see day in and day out, thank you for your service to the folks here, and particularly the victims of crime in Cobb County. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. You know, we just finished up with tax season, so let's start with that subject, and let me ask you a question about those matters. Tell the folks, if you would, some of the issues or cases that you may have seen come through our county that involve issues dealing with tax and tax fraud.
Well, the Cobb District Attorney's Office headed up the largest tax fraud case in state history, state-level tax fraud case. And what we learned from that is, for our CPAs in Cobb County, the importance of data security, because in the case that we headed up, it was a situation where people were burglarizing CPA offices, stealing the servers, then taking that information and going and filing, in our case, over 3,800 fraudulent tax IDs. And by that, they were able to rip off the federal government more than $5 million and our state government more than $1 million. And I'm proud to say that our unit, with the help of the Cobb County Sheriff's Department, was able to catch the perpetrator and hold them accountable, seize back over $1 million, and have appropriate restitution as well.
And I believe, if my memory is correct, that individual that your unit prosecuted ended up getting sent to the state prison system. Is that correct?
40 years to serve 20. Yes, sir.
Fantastic. It was a good outcome on that. Jason, let me turn to you for a moment. Again, let me thank you as well, and we'll get into a little bit about some of the specific type cases that you handle. I know you don't toot your horn a lot, but I would want the viewers to know you're probably quickly becoming one of the preeminent experts, particularly in elder abuse exploitation. We'll touch on that as we get into the show today. But thank you for your service to the citizens of the county. Tell the viewers, if you would, some of the specific type of cases that you see as a white-collar prosecutor in Cobb County.
Well, sure, Vic. And white-collar is a term which I think encompasses a lot of different things, and it could be anything from a small business owner who has an employee who maybe has used the computer system to take some cash from the cash drawer. It could also be something more complex involving, we've had cases which are hundreds of thousands of dollars where there are employees who are, duping the computer system in some way. We also include in that concept, and you mentioned the elder exploitation, there are a rise of unlicensed personal care home cases, and we consider those white-collar cases because it involves the licensure status of their ability to care for disabled folks or the elderly, and there are legal requirements for licensure to do those sorts of things, and there are lots of homes that are putting themselves in positions where they are preying on vulnerable citizens by portraying themselves as if they're licensed, but they're not. And that puts them in a position where they can then take the assets of these vulnerable adults, these disabled folks or elder folks.
Talking a little bit about those cases, unlicensed personal care home cases, Do I understand that those cases are on the rise in our county, and you're seeing more often those type of matters?
Unfortunately, they are, and I think they're on the rise in our county, but also throughout the state of Georgia and beyond. But we are seeing more and more of them here in Cobb County. The problem is we have an aging population. We call it the silver tsunami. There's the baby boomers are aging out. They're getting older. And as they age out, we quite frankly have a shortage of licensed bed space. So there's this issue of where do people go when they need help and assistance and they reach that stage in their life where they might need some personal care services, someone to help them out. And because there is this maybe this gap in services that we as even a nation, I think, need to address, I think there are some folks who are preying on that situation and they're offering up some of their homes and pulling people into their homes. Sometimes they advertise as if they are a really nice place to stay, and then you get there and it's not.
Sure. Well, I know that elder abuse, senior abuse prosecution, along with the investigation prosecution of those who may harm our mentally challenged individuals is near and dear to all three of us, and it's particularly special to you. And we'll come back and visit that a little bit more because I want the viewers to hear some of the things that you've done in this county and some of the prosecutions that you've spearheaded. John, obviously in Cobb, we're very blessed here. It's an affluent county, and the lifeblood of this county is the success of small businesses. We have a number, of course, Fortune 100 companies here, but the reality is small businesses are the engine that drives the train here in Cobb economically. Any advice that you can give to our small business owners who may be watching to put them in a position to avoid any type of massive thefts that may occur within their company?
Absolutely. And the cases that Jason and I have been working are anywhere between $500,000 all the way up to $10 million thefts that we're seeing. And the common denominator of the small businesses that have fallen prey to financial predators are that they have put someone in the position of trust to be either a bookkeeper or an accountant, and they never verify. And typically, those people are family members, friends, someone they knew, life partners, and they just trust them. But the advice that we would give them and what we've seen is that no matter how much you trust them, trust but verify. And if that had happened in so many cases that Jason and I have worked together, then the thefts wouldn't have occurred. And in many situations, we were blessed to be able to intervene at just the 11th hour and 59 minutes because it was discovered the company was being pushed into bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden something happened. It's like the hand of the Lord just came down and intervened, and the company discovered the theft. And Jason and I got to give a shout out to Jason too, because he's leading the charge on recovering restitution payments here in Cobb County for our victims of financial crimes as well. But it's been a real privilege to be able to help out our small businesses. But trust, but verify.
It's excellent advice. And speaking about that restitution, we'll revisit that in a moment too. I know that is something that's extremely important to the DA's office. In fact, I have committed to make that a priority the second term is how to get restitution back to the victims. But, you know, John, is another thing I'm sure you guys face too when you investigate and prosecute these type of cases, that I'm sure to some extent that it's not only hurtful, but it could be embarrassing to a company to realize that this family member or trusted individual is actually the person that's in fact thieving from that company.
Yes, sir. And not only that, but what we've seen is that the people that we have prosecuted, a good number of them have thefts in their background. And so if the company is hesitant to prosecute because it's a family member, because it's a friend, I would encourage you to continue on. We can fashion a resolution that's comfortable to everybody and still holds the offender accountable. Sometimes we're going to disagree with you and we're going to have to do what's right.
Certainly.
But if companies will hold their employees accountable, give us the opportunity to hold them accountable, you could not only help and protect yourselves, but you could protect future businesses and future victims in Cobb County, to include churches. Because we have some cases, and we've prosecuted some cases, where bookkeepers in churches, trusted Christians, have preyed on their churches, and in at least one case stole almost $100,000 from a small church. It's amazing.
It is amazing. It's a shame too. But Jason, throughout Cobb, obviously as large as it is and as many businesses as we have, they run the gamut. We see all kinds of businesses, family owned and up to, as I said a moment ago, Fortune 100 companies. And certainly everyone is susceptible to this type of circumstances happening to them. But in your experience in the unit you and John are involved in, is there perhaps a specific type of business that you may say could be more vulnerable than other businesses?
I think so, and unfortunately, you know, John talked a little bit about this, about the common denominator for a lot of our cases is this idea of somebody in a position of trust has betrayed that trust. And we see time and again that charities seem to be vulnerable. And I think what's going on is when you have a charity, you have folks who are getting involved because they mean well. They want to do good in the community, and they come into the situation very trusting of other individuals. I think the other piece is a lot of charities are part-time jobs for folks. They've got other jobs that they're doing, and this is something they do on the side. So they're not necessarily watching everything or watching the other people around them as closely as they could. We see Girl Scout troops. We see, you know, we've prosecuted an actual government charity that was related. There are all sorts of situations where I think people prey on the trusting nature of people who get involved in charities.
Well, I think that's good advice for businesses to, as John said a moment ago, to trust their folks, but certainly to verify that credibility and their history and making sure they're not being ripped off internally by people they believe they trust. And so what I want to do, we're going to take a little break, but when I come back, I really want to start delving into a little bit about some of the cases that we're doing up there involving our seniors and some specific type cases that the viewers may be interested in. So thank you so much for being with us today. You guys stay with us. To our viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break to our show, Gavel to Gavel. Thank you for watching.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Welcome back to Gavel. I'm your host, Cobb District Attorney Vic Reynolds, and today we're talking about the subject of white-collar crime, the investigation and prosecution of it here in our county. And again, I'm very honored to have as our guests two of our prosecutors, John Melvin and Jason Marbut. John, let me turn to you if I could. Obviously, these cases would be cases you would imagine that would be labor intensive, they would be paper intensive, a lot of documents. From our office's point of view, do we ever look outside of law enforcement to agencies that might help us in the investigation and prosecution of these type of cases?
Yes, sir, and I have to thank you for that, because what we need, in addition to law enforcement resources, because of the highly specialized and technical nature of white-collar crimes, thanks to the relationships you have with Southern Polytech and Kennesaw State, we've had the help of outside agencies like Professor Beacon and some of the advanced accounting students that he has. But additionally, there was one organization in Cobb County that has just been superlative in their support of white-collar prosecutions, our office and criminal justice efforts in general, and that's Investigative Accounting Group, IAG, Laurie Dyke's Forensic Accounting Group here in Cobb County. They have provided untold hours of support and courtroom testimony for our group, and without them, many of the cases that we have worked would have gone nowhere. The wheels would have been spinning in the mud, because we need their kind of expert support.
Well, I do know for a fact that IAG has just been a tremendous partner to
Yes,
law
sir.
enforcement and a tremendous partner to the Cobb DA's office, and you're right, we certainly owe them a debt of gratitude, as do the citizens of this county and the victims of this type of crime.
That's right.
Jason, you know, talking about white-collar crime, When most people think of criminals, and that's a broad generic word, I know, but they think of people who hurt other people physically, who may sell drugs or break in houses or things of that nature, who perhaps may not come from a good background, may not be educated. And some of the defendants that you see in your unit are different from that. And I know there's no particular stereotypical definition you can give of a white-collar criminal, but are there some things about those individuals who commit those crimes that are perhaps a little different from other individuals you see who are prosecuted for crimes?
They certainly think that there's a difference. And I say that in terms of the defendants that we often prosecute, time and again seem to have this idea that they are better than the other criminals. And in my book, a thief is a thief. When we talk about white collar, what we mean is really complex crimes. That's really what we're focused on when we do white collar cases. But time and again, quite frankly, it surprised me over the years doing this sort of work and prosecuting these sort of cases, how somebody can steal from their employer, they can bite from the hand that feeds them, they can prey on the elderly or the disabled, and then they'll come into court and they'll say again and again, well, I didn't rob anybody, I didn't point a gun at somebody. But what they did is they still ruined somebody's lives, and as John kind of talked about before, they can put businesses on the verge of bankruptcy. There are real consequences to these sorts of crimes, but somehow again and again people try and justify and rationalize away their behavior. There's a saying, which is a favorite of mine, it's that sin has many tools, but a lie is the handle that fits them all. Mm-hmm. And in these white-collar cases, that's the handle that's here that comes into play time and time again. There's a lie at the core of what is going on, and these liars and thieves we treat just like we treat other liars and thieves. They need to be prosecuted.
What makes these cases, you've touched on it some, but what would make a white-collar case unique to law enforcement in the investigation of it as opposed to investigating a burglary or a drug case?
I think the lack of violence is typically a hallmark of our cases. Usually we don't have violent offenders, so there certainly is a difference in that regard. But I think really it's the number crunching. And I echo what John said about IAG. They have done some pro bono work where they've come in and we've had some manpower issues in terms of needing some additional support to look through to bank records. It's tedious work. It takes up a lot of time, and a lot of times law enforcement, I think, is overwhelmed with these sorts of cases because you can put 40 hours into a case and come out with, one charge of something, but you needed to put that 40 hours in before you could figure out exactly, was this a theft or was this something else that was going on. And so that complexity and that amount of tedious work, I think, is something that's different about these cases. And it's, quite frankly, it's why sometimes people get away with this sort of work. Sure. And it's something that I appreciate you giving us the opportunity, and I know it's a big focus for you, that we take the time to make sure that we do prosecute these cases right, so that people can be held accountable for what they do.
Well, it's that proverbial paper trail that we always hear about, having the time and manpower to follow it to the end and ultimately hold people accountable. John, we talked a little bit earlier about this office's desire to make sure that our seniors, that demographic we care so much about, are taken care of and are protected under the law. Talk a little bit about some of the financial exploitation cases that you have seen personally in Cobb that you and Jason have been involved in the prosecution of.
Financial exploitation is such a huge area when it comes to our elder population, our vulnerable adult population. We in Cobb, and I don't mean to toot our horn, but we're on the cutting edge statewide of financial elder exploitation and elder abuse. One of the cases that we prosecuted involved the assets involving over $10 million that had been seized by an unscrupulous individual who was posing as power of attorney for a 91-year-old lady who had just trusted him and loved him. And within a 22-month period, he stole over $3.6 million. With the coordinated efforts of the Cobb County Sheriff's Department, our office was able to put a stop to the significant loss of money, as well as to successfully prosecute this individual and his father. And now they're serving substantial time in prison, and they're also in a repayment plan because we're going to get that money back. In addition to cases like that, and it's not just the big fish, but we're also looking for our elder population to protect them from theft no matter how big or how small. And we have a number of cases that involves thousands of dollars, but to that adult, that elder person, that's their life savings. And the problem with elder financial exploitation is we have so many different schemes, whether it's the Irish travelers coming up saying, I want to fix your driveway for $500 and then trying to stick them with an $8,000 bill, or it's the grandparent scam where people are calling up pretending to be their grandchild and saying, hey, I need you to bail me out. We have so many different scams out there. Our elder population needs to be vigilant, and when we hear about it, we're going to take them to task, hold them accountable.
Well, it is a sad circumstance, and I know you guys see it day in and day out. Jason, what can, if we could tell our seniors anything, or even perhaps their family members, what would some pieces of advice that we could give them to be careful and watch out for their relatives?
Sure. I think one of the things that they could do is to be open and vocal with each other. If you've got family around, tell them what your plans are with your money. Financial conversations are hard sometimes with families. That we even when you love and trust somebody, sometimes you don't want to talk about where you are financially, what you want to do, or how you want your money spent. And so I think sometimes when people find themselves as their mental acuity is diminishing, and they have not had those conversations, that's when other folks can swoop in and take advantage of them. So you want to have those conversations before you reach that point. And by the same token, I think you need to report. When people are doing things that are wrong, you need to see, if you see something, you say something. Mm-hmm. And even if they're friends and family and trusted members, we've got agencies that will look into those things. We've got Adult Protective Services who can help people out to help them find resources if they are finding themselves in situations where they're feeling overwhelmed about how to properly care for somebody and how to deal with just deal with life as you age and have to deal with problems.
You know, our mantra at the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force is exactly that. If you see something, say something, and I think that's great advice. John, before we leave this subject and move into our last area about training and educating other folks around the state about this area, I know you mentioned when we talked about in the first half of the show how sometimes and it was common that trusted people in businesses were the ones who were committing the thefts. Do you see that same circumstance with the financial exploitation of the elderly? Is it frequently they're trusted people, even family members?
Without question, and what the stats are showing is that over 78% of the people that are financially abusing our elder population are trusted family members or trusted individuals, to include pastors, to include people that have powers of attorney. So in that situation, I would encourage open and honest discussions, like Jason was saying, with all family members, so that the person that has the power, if in fact the elder has given power to someone else to manage finances, that person is being watched as well. The times that are being seen, and one of the difficulties of prosecuting this is when we're seeing that a trusted family member has been given that kind of power, there is a hesitancy to be able to report it because you don't want to get the family member in trouble. And so many times what Jason and I see is that we are being brought in at the very last when all resources are depleted, and that is such a heartbreaking situation. So we'd encourage people to get involved with their family, to watch their family. Don't call mom and daddy just once a year. Make sure that you go see them on a regular basis, because many of these cases are people that are trusted or people that are just plain old lonely.
Okay. Last area, we just got a couple of minutes left in the show. I do want to touch on some of the things that I'm very proud of that you guys are doing, and that's some of the training around the not only Cobb County, but for various members in the state about how to investigate and prosecute not only white-collar crimes, but elderly crimes as well. Jason, touch on a little bit to the viewers what some of the things you and John have been doing around the state to educate and train other folks.
Sure. One of the biggest things that we've done is over this past year, John and I were part of a team which included some ladies from the YWCA, some retired APS, Adult Protective Services person, and as well as Detective Lisa Wells from the Cobb County Police Department. And we have now trained 600 plus Cobb County police officers, approximately 25 at a time. There were 8-hour trainings that we went through on how to recognize elder abuse and exploitation and how to deal with those cases and investigate them better and work together as a team to make sure that we're solving these issues. John and I are also part of a prosecutorial team that goes around the state training other prosecutors. It's a training designed by prosecutors for prosecutors. We have also worked with investigators who work within prosecutors' offices. We do talks and seminars and panels. Most recently, I know I went to Ridgeview Institute, and there were probably 75 to 100 social workers and hospital caregivers in the room, and we talked with them a little bit about this unlicensed personal care home crisis, elder abuse and disabled persons, and how to recognize those signs of abuse, and talked about the mandated reporting requirements on those folks and what they need to do and how to talk to people when they're seeing things.
Well, thanks so much for doing that. I want to let both of you know before we wrap up the show that I certainly appreciate your dedication, your integrity, the way you handle these cases from top to bottom, your willingness to take up for the most vulnerable members of our society, and I know sometimes our seniors fit that category. So on behalf of the citizens of this county, on behalf of the victims of crime, thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us today on Gavel to Gavel. We appreciate you having us guests. We could do another couple of shows on this subject. We may do that in the future. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in today to Gavel. I'm your host, Cobb District Attorney Vic Reynolds. We ask that you stay tuned for future installments of Gavel to Gavel as we look into the criminal justice system in our county. Again, thank you for watching us, and stay safe.
For those dealing with the daily struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. That's why AARP created a community with experts and other caregivers to help us better care for ourselves and the ones we love.
The odds of becoming a successful NASCAR driver, 1 in 125 billion. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. I'm Jamie McMurray. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.